Hi, everybody. So I wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about our vocabulary to kind of give you an overview for this unit. So the first big idea I wanted to talk about is this idea of historical myth. So there is a lot of things that happened in history. So much stuff that happens every day, right? And only a small portion of that stuff actually gets recorded. And then out of that stuff, historians pull the ideas that they think are most interesting. And then on top of that, we build kind of myths that tell us about who we are and who we are as a country. So we've talked a little bit more about this, but we're going to talk a lot about it this week. And as we talk more about the American Revolution, it becomes more and more relevant. So there's a difference between what we remember happening, like as a country and as a culture, and what actually happened. We'll talk more about this specifically when we talk about Thanksgiving. But I just want you to think about the difference between the way you probably did Thanksgiving in elementary school. Maybe you made those funny paper hats and people you like sat and ate lunch together, and what we've talked about actually happening in this course so far. So there is a difference between the way we remember things happening and the way things actually happened. Movies, books, and monuments help build our memory of the way things happened, our historical myths that tell us about who we are. Um, we're also going to talk a little bit about why these myths might change over time and what that can mean for you. So the next thing we got to talk about is natural rights. Colonists believed in some big ideas, and those ideas kind of we can summarize in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. They believed that these rights belonged to people just because they were people, and that those rights couldn't be taken away from you, but you could give them up. And this is going to come into play later when they are mad at the king and at parliament because they're like, you are taking away our rights, and we never told you that you could do that. So natural rights are rights that colonists believe that every person possessed. There's a difference between believing that every person possessed those rights and being able to actually give every person those rights. And this is something that in the United States today, we're still working on, right? Like, what does life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or the pursuit of property mean today? And we're still trying to talk about that. So this is something that kind of carries over. The American Revolution happened, we've been talking about it, right? The American Revolution starts before the War for Independence and it lasts till after the War for Independence has um, been achieved. So the American Revolution describes the political movement that inspires the War for Independence. It's hard to give it a start date. So we've been talking about a lot of things that sort of build up. Some people say it starts in 1774 with the First Continental Congress. Some people say it starts earlier with the Boston Massacre or the Boston Tea Party. But it's sort of a slow process, and it happens over time, and then it gets bigger and culminates in our Constitution and becoming a country. But it inspires the War for Independence. The War for Independence is a lot easier to say this is when it happened. It starts in 1775 with the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and it ends in 1783 with the Treaty of Paris. So this is the actual we're fighting for independence space. A militia is a group of civilians who are trained to fight for emergencies. They're a volunteer army. Militias eventually are going to grow into what today we call the National Guard, but at this time it's like a neighborhood watch. A bunch of people in your neighborhood, they protect your neighborhood. Regulars this is the regular British Army. These dudes, they have some special forces that have some different uniforms, like different colors, or like the Scottish regulars wear kilts. But this is sort of the standard that you'll see a lot. Sometimes we call these guys redcoats, but they're British regulars. They're regular forces trained. They're not militia called up at a moment's notice. The Sons of Liberty, we've talked about these guys. They're a semi-legal political group that works towards freedom for American colonists. At first, that freedom just means like fewer taxes, more local control. Eventually, it means independence. They started committees of correspondence so they know who each other are and they can talk to each other quickly about ideas that are happening. They also boycott goods, and they also participate in violence against loyalists and against the British government. Boycott is a person or group refusing to buy something, often for political or social reasons. We talked about boycott on from the Stamp Act, but we'll also talk about the boycott of tea that happens and the Continental Congress. This is the government for the 13 colonies. The first one happens in 1774. Not everybody shows up. A couple of things about the Continental Congress. These were not elected officials. It was just like a bunch of people from the Sons of Liberty were like, who's really good at leading? And then they all talked to their friends and they got together and they met and they said, we need to talk to Great Britain about this. So this is kind of like the who's who of colonial America. It's everything from social leaders, so people who were very popular, to people who had a lot of money, to people who were actually elected officials. It wasn't like the people in the colonies voted for these guys. They just sort of were like, I'm gonna be in charge and go to this thing. Non-importation is the official term for a boycott. So the Continental Congress will sign a non-importation agreement. So it's an agreement by merchants not to buy or import products from a certain country. So it's non or don't import this thing. And that is all I have. So you should, I'll post this below and you can keep looking at it. Fill out your notes. Remember, in your notes, use your own definition and then give an example. That will help it stick in your brain a little bit better. And then take the quiz at the bottom. As we talk this week, I hope that you really are looking for these terms and seeing how they fit in with what we're learning.